Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, Admin Evangelist, and this is How I Solved It. Did you know you can use Salesforce to solve non-work problems? In this episode, Gordon Lee uses the power of Salesforce as a solution to getting one consolidated catered order to a vendor while still allowing everyone to place their individual Boba orders. Today, I'm with Gordon Lee, my long-lost cousin. Just kidding. He's a Salesforce MVP, co-leader of the San Francisco nonprofit user group, and a returning guest to How I Solved It. Welcome back, Gordon.
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me. Great to be back.
So, Gordon, you're currently a director, Salesforce solutions architect at Common Sense Media. But way back when, you started off your career as a Salesforce admin 15 years ago. How did you get started with Salesforce?
Yeah, I've definitely been in the ecosystem for a long time. Back 15 years ago, I was not looking for Salesforce. Salesforce at the time was what we considered bleeding edge because people were still trying to decipher terms like downloading and surfing the web. But I had been at my current financial firm for about a few years, and I was starting to get tired of my current position. I was looking for something more back-end, something more operational. And I had noticed that they had a job posting internally that they hadn't filled in 6 months, and it was for a Salesforce administrator for their back-end call center. I knew nothing about it, but I was like, if you send me to the training, I can do this job. And so they did. They took me up on the offer, sent me to the training, 4 days of a deep dive. And when I came back, there was a massive to-do list of things that they wanted in the Salesforce platform. So it was sink or swim time. And from there, I basically never looked back. It was just very interesting to see how one person, after some intense training, could make such a huge impact at a company with one platform. So that's the story of how I started off in my career.
Great. Now, for someone who's looking to break into Salesforce as an admin, what type of advice do you have for them?
Oh, there are so many resources out there these days compared to when I started. I think the number one advice, besides what you hear around Trailhead and super badges and getting some experience that way, I believe that one of the reasons why I've succeeded so well in the ecosystem and have stayed for so long is the community. So I would say find your local community group, go to your local community conferences, as well as the officially sponsored Salesforce ones, and just connect with people because everyone's path is different. There's a million different ways to be breaking into the Salesforce ecosystem, and you have to kind of figure out what your flavor is and sort of like how your path is going to look and just connect because that's the whole big thing here is that if you try to do all this stuff by yourself in an island, at least for me, I feel like that's just a detriment. It's harder to get started that way.
Cool. So I know you have a really unique use case. So tell us about how you and some fellow organizers use Salesforce to bring together Boba-loving and Boba-interested trailblazers for an event. But first, what the heck is Boba?
So Boba, for those of you who don't know, it's actually a tea drink with different flavors, which includes these things called tapioca balls. And now this drink, you can either have it with milk or without milk and experiment with different teas and flavors and toppings. But it's actually a drink that originated in Taiwan in the early 1980s. And Taiwanese migrants brought it to the US in the 90s, initially in California through regions like LA County and San Francisco and New York. And so the word boba actually has become synonymous with the drink, and so it has a few different names. Apparently, on the East Coast, they call it bubble tea, which is what sort of the original name was. And the West Coast, we call it boba tea, but I've heard it called things like pearl milk tea or bubble milk tea or tapioca milk tea, or just as we call it, we just call it boba.
No. Preference question for you. Do you like those popping bobas? Because I'm not really into that. Like I like the pure tapioca boba.
So Jen, you're referring to all these different toppings that have evolved over the years besides just the standard tapioca balls. And so the popping boba, not a big fan, although I did like Gushers when I was a kid. And so that's sort of like the equivalent. Nowadays, I actually prefer what they call grass jelly, which is like a milder topping. And so it doesn't add too much sweetness to your drink. But back in the day, definitely, I was a huge fan of boba and I would just be drinking it pretty much every day.
What we should have done, Gordon, for this thing, which I didn't even think about, is we both should have had a boba drink with us. Like, what were you thinking? Now I want one.
I was like, do I have one? Do I have a bottled boba drink lying around? I have a Boba straw. I don't have the drink though.
Bummer. We're gonna have
Yeah,
to like redo this. Totally
I
redo.
know. Just
Yeah.
like drinking the whole time, spitting out the balls. Yeah. What about you though? What's your favorite flavor or preference?
I like the regular tapioca ones. And then I normally like it with like a smoothie type of thing, like
Oh
a
yeah.
mango or strawberry smoothie. And if they don't have that, then I'll just go for the regular teas. But
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to think about the I was trying to think about sort of what is the equivalent of boba in sort of Western culture, because, it is very interesting when you're drinking something and then there's like toppings that you're
yeah,
supposed to chew and
and you like
swallow and
slurp
eat.
up into the straw.
Yeah. And so that's like, and they're like, I've heard people say, you mean soup? I'm like, not soup.
No, no.
But I was like, I guess there's nothing that compares. I think it's basically uniquely its own thing, and it should be, because it's it's from another culture, and so we should respect that. But like, I think it's just definitely uniquely its own thing, and that's why I think so many people love it. And but also why I think so many people are sort of afraid of it.
Yeah,
And that's sort of how we started up Boba Blazers, as a way for people to approach this in a safe space. No judgment. You come, you check it out. We have a drink for you for free, and you decide to experiment with it and figure out what you like, if you like it, if you don't like it, and then basically it's really just an excuse to socialize,
exactly.
and to get to know each other.
So, as you and your other organizers were organizing this boba event, what types of challenges did you come into that you ended up using Salesforce for?
Yeah, we were not thinking about using Salesforce for this. Really, it was around the logistics of collecting the drink orders and making sure that we had everyone's order correct. But when we started looking into our preferred vendor, and we saw their online catering menu, we quickly ran into some logistical problems, for me and my co-organizers, who were all volunteers. So we have day jobs. We can't be spending all of our time monitoring this whole thing. So one of the biggest issues was that there was not really a group cart option. So we're like, how are we going to figure out how to coordinate 50 plus people's drink
Sure.
orders in one place, right? Like, either one of us needs to then make sure we enter everything in manually into the cart, or we have to figure out a more automated way. There's got to be a better way. Like, the three of us work in Salesforce. We've got to
Right.
figure this out. So, long story short, really, how we came about this was like, we should use Salesforce as a way to collect all this information around the drinks, and provide a nice, neat report to our vendor and say, can you use this instead of us filling out your catering form? And then just you create the drinks from there. They basically wrote back and said, I have never seen an order so neatly organized before. And this is just from an export of our Salesforce report, and said, yes, we can do that as long as you get it to us, 2 days prior. And so with that out of the way, really the thing was, how do we create a form that's accessible by anyone, on a public site, so that they can put in their preferences, and it's completely automated. The team and I don't have to worry about everything being correct or not. All the options are there, all the pick list values are there, and basically then we just have to forward the report and the contents on the day that we agreed on.
So, admins like to nerd out in setup. So, can you show us how you built this?
Sure. So this is our vendor's catering site. And you can see here that they have a plethora of drinks that you can choose from, different categories here. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. And as you click into each one, there's definitely preferences that you can set, things like your ice level, your sweetness level, and additional toppings like what we had just talked about. And so obviously this is a nightmare if one of us as volunteers would have to come in here and enter in all 50 plus orders. So you can see here that there's a lot of room for error. If one of us just clicks something accidentally, it makes a bad order for our person who ordered it, and doesn't provide them a great experience. So we needed a way to automate this and to make sure that all this stuff would be as accurate as possible without as much intervention from us as possible. This is how we built it inside Salesforce, using a screen flow and using an Experience Cloud site. So first off, this is a password screen. This actually was not up during initial registration, but we needed a way to sort of stop the orders from coming in after a certain date or time. So I put this up here in order to make sure that we can control that and gate that. So we put in the password, we get in, and here's the form. Very, very straightforward. You fill it out with certain information. And then you start selecting your drink options like you would on our vendor site. In this case, ice blended beverages. You have all your different flavors that you can choose from. Your ice level, your sweetness level, your ice level, and as many toppings as you would like. You hit next, and the person is hit with a nice little confirmation screen that shows them what they ordered. And there you go. They should get an email also in their inbox that summarizes this so that they have the confirmation for our event. Over here is where you can see nicely in the report and that the order came through with everything that they filled out. And that way, no manual intervention by the organizers. Again, this just exports nicely into an Excel file that we provided to our vendor, and they were able to use this to make all the drinks and make our event a huge success. So some back-end things here, but this is the end product. The first thing you're going to want to do is create an experience site. So I've already set it up in my org here. So it's going to look a little different. If you're setting it up for the first time, when you go to home and you go to my domain and you click on that, you're going to be met with the setup wizard if you haven't set this up before. But because I have set this up, all the settings are already pre-filled out here for me. So once you set that up, the next thing you're going to have to do is build out your specific custom object with all its fields. Here is a quick view of what we built out to be able to populate the screen flow and capture everyone's orders. You can see here that we basically created some custom fields around the brewed tea or the crema tea or the fruit tea, ice blended, ice level, etc. And sort of quickly, what are the attributes of those fields? As you can see, basically it was all pick lists. We did have a formula field called main drink that summarized what the actual drink they chose out of from the 6 categories. And that was basically what was shown on the report. And after you build out these fields, then it's time to basically populate your flow. So here's our screen flow, pretty straightforward, but we're going to get into each of these components and talk through them. So the first thing, as I talked about, is the password screen. And this is relatively easy drag and drop. We uploaded an image, we put in the password, and in order to create the password, all you have to do is basically say in the formula that the password field here has to equal the password constant. And this is a variable that I set up prior to the screen, which you can see here in your elements, password constant. And that's it. That was the password that I put down here. And so if you put in the correct password, it allows you to get past the password screen. This is also a reminder that I will have to change this password after this demo so that not everyone comes in here and starts messing with this form. So after that, here's the main Boba order form. And as you can see, very similarly, very quick and easy to customize. Here's a rich text field. Here's another rich text field. Here's all the fields that I brought in from that custom object that we built, as well as from the contact record, first, last name, email, the drink options, the fruit tea flavors, milk tea flavors. You can see here that these are all just pick lists. That's just a reproduction of the vendor's catering site. And then down here, your different ice level toppings and all these other fields that we created. It's pretty straightforward. After that, we wanted to create a contact record for the people so that in future Boba Blazers events, if we have them, we're not creating duplicate contact records all the time. And then here's the gist of it, of creating the actual order, which is what is populating that report that I showed. Very easy mapping. The brew tea flavors from the screen should be going to the field brew tea flavors on the order object, etc. Ice blended fruit tea, etc., etc. Very, very straightforward here. And then here, we basically did a call in the flow to actually get the order, because this is one of those things that's a nuance of flow. Just because you create it doesn't mean that the flow knows that you still want it. So after you create the order, we then have to get the order record ID along with all the fields that come with that particular order record. And so we said store that into, store all the fields from that record, right? Find the ID that equals the order's ID from the create order from the step above, and then store all the fields in there. And then here is just sending the email. Now, quick little gotcha here is that this email here, you don't see the template right away. And so we actually built this template inside the flow. If you want to use an email that you already built, you're going to have to use an email alert, and that'll be included in a link somewhere or in an article that gets written up as a companion piece to this. But that's the bulk of the send email action. And then here, just to show you all how easy it is to create that inside a flow, I have a text template that is the email. And this is it. It's just, very much like very much like the email templates that you're used to creating in terms of the text, the drink options, the fields, and things like that. And the same thank you from the San Francisco Nonprofit User Group and the WIT Sunnyvale group leaders. And at the end, the nice little confirmation screen, which is what you saw earlier. Thank you for your order. First name person. Here's your order number, the drink, the sweetness, the ice level, the toppings, etc. And that's it. That is the flow that you create in order to populate. Now, you're not done here, though, because after you create the flow and you have your Experience Cloud site, you have to connect the two together. And that actually is a very, very simple process where you go into your site. So you go to Home, and you would go into All Sites, which brings you here to Digital Experiences. And we only have one, so here's the builder. Now, caveat is that I'm doing this on an existing Experience Cloud site. As co-leader of the San Francisco Nonprofit User Group, we actually built this site as our one-stop shop to hold everything that's related to our user group. And so we're like, let's not spin up another one. Let's just add this on here. So I created a page to put the flow on called Orders. And really, it was as simple as saying, dragging in the component, the flow component. Here, you drag it in, and when you drag it in, they say, which flow do you want? And you select the ones that's active. Make sure your flow is active, otherwise it doesn't show up in this list. And then that's it. And you can't see it in the preview mode, but once you publish it, it looks exactly like this if I refresh it. And that's basically how we powered Boba Blazers at Trailblazer DX with a single screen flow.
So I know you mentioned that this is public. The user doesn't need to be authenticated to access. So as an admin setting this up for the first time, what are the things that they need to set up or consider?
Yeah, good question. Because on an Experience Cloud site, you can definitely choose between two flavors of authentication versus unauthenticated or a guest user. So for our group, we want everyone to be able to access every single page on here. There's nothing that we're hiding at the moment. So on the site-wide stuff, you have to click on Settings and make sure that this box is checked, public access. Guest users can see and interact with the site without logging in. And then on the individual page, we also, let me click out of this for a second. On the individual page, you also want to make sure that your page access here is public. And so the site default setting is public because of the setting that I set earlier. But you can also, on each individual page, you can either say public or requires login. We chose to make it public and then basically put up the password screen at the end in order to block people out so that we didn't get orders after our cutoff date.
Cool. And about how long did it take for you to put this all together?
The funny thing is the longest part of this was actually going through our vendor's site and trying to basically isolate all the different options that they had. But after that, building everything out, it really only took about, I would say 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Gordon, for showing us how you use Salesforce with Experience Cloud, custom object flow, and the Salesforce report to solve your own use case of providing a catered order to a vendor.
Yeah, thanks, Jen, for having me. And I'm hoping that this moves people forward in a direction of, even though, this Salesforce example here was about something technically non-Salesforce related, you can definitely, as an admin, use this in your own workday processes around maybe setting up a password screen or just automating things for maybe, for example, your next Boba Blazers event at your office.
You just saw how Gordon Lee uses Salesforce skills with Experience Cloud, a custom object, flow, and a report to generate one consolidated catered order to a vendor while still allowing everyone to place their individual Boba orders. Way to flex those app building skills. You can always find videos like this at admin.salesforce.com and also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Salesforce Admins, so you will never miss another episode of How I Solved It. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome admin.